Let's talk about mainstream games. Like any type of media, different games have different audiences that they appeal to. Some games try to appeal to the widest audience that they can and grab as many people as possible so that the game is successful. However, some games attempt to have a more focused target audience and create an experience more tailor-made for a specific audience, despite sacrificing broader appeal. While I'm sure that every developer wants their game to do really well, there's generally a common understanding that making some types of games means that you're gonna have to hamper your expectations on how well they'll do. Every game ever made falls on the line between the two categories of literally everyone must like this game. If not everyone likes this game, we die! To, oh yeah, I made this game for me and we made Greg, so if you don't like it, then that's alright mate, it wasn't made for you. Now, competitive games inherently land on a pretty weird place on this scale. While the idea that competitive games aren't appealing to mass markets is understandable, in recent times we've seen a lot more competitively focused games itch their way into the mainstream. Games like League of Legends, Valorant, and Fortnite are all extremely successful games with extremely big competitive communities and tournaments that are, or I guess were, watched by millions. These games are extremely successful and mainstream in spite of their competitive nature. These games prove that no matter the complexity of the games, if given the right circumstances, they can become extremely successful. So that begs the question, why aren't fighting games more mainstream? Now, some of you may be going, actually, Gecko, fighting games are mainstream. People know about Street Fighter and Tekken, and they always do really well. Case closed, video over. And while, yes, you do have a point that they had an impact on popular culture, most of the time when people are talking about Street Fighter and Tekken, they are talking about ancient entries in the series and not actually talking about the current games that people play. Fighting games didn't die with the arcades, but their acceptance in the mainstream has slowly been lagging behind ever since the arcades did die. With games leaning more towards esports, we haven't really seen a big fighting game rise to match the greats. But why is that? Why is it that a game genre which helped create the foundation for what esports could become in the future was left behind as other games flourished? Well, there's multiple reasons, but before we go into those, we need to figure out what makes most mainstream games as successful as they are. As games have begun to get more and more popular, developers have begun to realize something. Players like it when they win. When games were first being made, developers would intentionally, or most of the time accidentally, make sections of their games which were much harder than other parts in order to add playtime to their game so that players didn't feel like they wasted their money or they tried to get more quarters out of them at the arcades. However, once we started shifting more and more to home consoles, developers slowly began to master the art of making games challenging but fair, over just making them bullshit hard for the sake of it. Infinite lives or continues, difficulty settings, and the removal/streamlining of previously frustrating mechanics paved the way for better and better games. While sometimes players will argue on what features are good changes and which of them make games too easy, most people can agree that the games are more accessible nowadays and more people are able to play them. But there is a problem with competitive games that other games don't have to face. Changing the difficulties for one player without affecting the opposing player is basically impossible. Since competitive games have players facing against each other, if you make something easier for one player, you generally have to do that at the cost of making it harder for another player. You shift the balance so that one player has to work less in order to achieve a goal when compared to another player. For the player receiving the benefit, it can feel good, but for the player losing something, it can be infuriating. So competitive games need to find other ways to get their players invested. A lot of games like this need to use some sort of dopamine hook to keep players playing. For some games, this means having players start out by fighting low-level AI, or being put into games where they're most likely going to win so that they get their sweet rush of victory. If that isn't enough though, they can be given things around the game to help them. Experience points, cosmetics, new characters, or just secret surprise tools that we'll be using later will give players some incentive to keep playing and hopefully get them hooked. But there's another big way that competitive games and even non-competitive games use to get people playing every single day. If you want people to do things without questioning them, the best way to get them to do it is to have them form a habit. Everyone in the world has habits. Brushing your teeth before you go to bed, spending an hour on the sofa after you finish work, or scrolling through YouTube for 30 minutes in an attempt to find something good before saying fuck it and just watching the same thing that you always watch. In video games though, this means finding a way to get people to play as many days in a row as possible. This generally comes in the form of daily and weekly missions that players can complete in order to get some sort of reward. Generally again things like cosmetics or external experience. MMOs generally do this really well, giving players massive things to work towards so that they get into the habit of playing every single day and have it become a normal part of their routine. Also, things like Battle Pass and seasonal events do this really well by having players log into the game as often as possible to get rewards with the hope that they begin to have the habit form that lasts for a longer time than the event spans. And when you have a large group of people logging in several times a week to play the same game, you begin to form a community. Humans by their natures are social creatures and naturally seek out communities in which they feel like they can be themselves and connect with other like-minded people who they can relate to. For video games, this means seeking out people who enjoy the same games as they do and finding places that they can share their feelings on the games. If the players who play your game don't naturally form a community, then you can find ways to get players to communicate. Invite your friends and you'll get X reward. Post this achievement on social media for bonus rewards. Or you could just turn your dedicated social media account into a meme page just for the game. Fostering a community around your game is a pretty important part of getting people interested in playing. Do you think I would have tried Final Fantasy XIV if it wasn't for the fact that the community endlessly boasts about how it's God's savior to MMORPGs? No, I'd have probably gone back to playing something dumb like Bloons Tower Defense, or just replay Devil May Cry 3 till Virgil killed me in real life. Now, if your game is good, or was good at some point apparently, a community will generally develop around the game naturally. But what if your game is bad, or even worse, mediocre? Well, you can always just do what every big business likes to do, and just throw more money at the problem till it goes away. Listen, if you run into any problem in life, there's always two ways to solve it. A lot of hard work, time, personal development, and persistence to get the task done at hand, or a bunch of money. If you can't get people to play your game for some reason, you can just keep throwing money at the marketing team in order to get them to shove the game in front of literally everyone they can, whether they want to see it or not. Your game doesn't need to be good, fun, interesting, or even competently made if you have the marketing budget to just absolutely dump that shit all over the world and put it in the hands of everyone. I'm sure upon hearing this, you're thinking of some pretty legendary games that have been making rounds around YouTube for the past couple of years, and I'm glad to say that I'm proudly sponsored today by my Patreon, which you can join in the description. I'll post on it soon, I promise. Just the last couple of months have been a little bit crazy. Honestly, this is the way that most AAA games go down nowadays to foster communities. Just dump a bunch of money on the marketing team, make a fancy animated trailer, drop it everywhere you can, get Jeff Keighley to suck your dick for a little bit, and watch the money flow back into your account. Is it an honest way to promote your games? God no, but it works, and it gets people playing the games and spending money. Obviously, not all games are marketed in a way that trick players into playing them, but if you've tried everything else and it's not working, I mean, the option's always there. So how do all of these apply to fighting games? Fighting games are in a unique position. There's a few things that they do really, really well, and then there's some things that they either do terribly or they literally don't even attempt. Let's start with the one that they get absolutely right: the sense of community. Talk to any avid fighting game player, and they will tell you that the thing that got them hooked on these games is easily the community around them. The fighting game community is an amazing place full of people who genuinely love these games for what they are and want others to love them as much as they do. They organize events, they create mods to enhance the game, they create content unlike anything I've seen from any other game genre, and good god, they just love to go at each other's throats, but it's all part of the charm in the community. Like recently in Strive, there was talks about some North America players making a top 100 ranking based off of tournament results and other achievements, and the community devolved into attacking each other. It was great. In all seriousness though, the The community is one of the most amazing communities I felt like I've ever been a part of. It can seem scary with some of the toxicity, but the majority of the FGC has a zero bullshit policy. If you're being a piece of shit, you get kicked out immediately without any hesitation or second thought. I love this community and the people in it. It's safe, it's inviting, and it's a great way to meet new people and grow as a person. However, that's not exactly thanks to the people who develop these games. While it's true that there are some games that allow players to organize in-game and form bonds through the game, most of the games don't have those kind of features. The closest game that I can think to actually doing anything to foster an in-game community is Street Fighter V with the Capcom Fighting Network, which was certainly an attempt. It has things like clubs, which allow you to be in a general group with your friends or just other people and show off your cool club title, but apart from that, it doesn't do too much. Hopefully in Street Fighter 6 they implement these features more and iron out some of the kinks so that players can do more things with it. Like, maybe add a club battle mode where you can go against other clubs in like crib battles and have to gain rank points to get an overall club position on a leaderboard. Then at the end it checks to see who is the biggest club, and if you're part of one of the bigger ones you all get prizes, and the players who contributed the most get bigger, flashier prizes. Apart from Street Fighter though, I can't think of any other fighting game that tries to engage with its players like this. Tekken has cosmetics that you can unlock with coins and through treasure battle, but you get so many coins from starting out now that you can basically buy whatever you want. Plus most of the things that people actually want is behind paid DLC, so you can't grind for it. Strive has a similar thing with its character customization and aura, but that's A, just for high-end players, and B, really easy to get all of it at once if you get to Celestial because you break the economy. I have all of the items in the game now. What am I supposed to do with all this money? Just having things to work towards that I can show off to other players would be nice, but fighting games unfortunately suck at this, and I think it could be a great place for them to try and improve. In other games, normally you get things even if you don't win a bunch of matches, so you feel like you keep playing and eventually you'll get the thing that you want. But in fighting games, the cool stuff is all just attached to winning. They also don't encourage players to try and form habits within the game. Now, this is something that I personally actually respect about these games. While I understand the appeal of daily and weekly missions, I can see that they're kind of manipulative and get people to play long after they've lost interest in the game to feel like they just need to finish their dailies. Don't even get me started on shit like battle passes. Good God, I hate those fucking things. But the games could use something that isn't just internal motivation to keep players playing for a while. Giving players a way to flex on other players or just something to grind for will hopefully keep them around for a while, and maybe introduce them to other parts of the community that love these games. But the biggest thing that they're failing to do is easily finding a way to hook players and keep them invested. If you were to ask any fighting game player why they started playing fighting games, the general answer is either because they advanced from something like Dragon Ball FighterZ or Smash Brothers and were introduced to a new game by some friends, or heard about it because it was new in the community and they started playing these games because they looked cool. Most of the reason that players play these games is because external factors that the games themselves don't attempt to foster in players. They simply hand it to the community, and the community is the one to promote these games and get players interested. I've had several long-time viewers tell me that I'm the reason that they started playing Strive, and I've even seen some of them improve way above what they were originally playing on. Imagine how big these games could get if they were marketed as something like League of Legends or Genshin Impact. Imagine instead of seeing ads for insert mobile game here, you saw ads for Street Fighter 6 at the start of every video on YouTube. There would be so many more people playing these games, dude. Now, obviously, there are problems with this. Fighting games aren't the most lucrative business ventures, so spending billions on marketing the game won't exactly be the most smart thing to do, but I seriously think the reason why most modern fighting games aren't as popular as other genres is because they just aren't getting their name out there as much, and they aren't hooking people. There is the argument that in other games you can play with your friends, and thus it's harder to get a group into playing fighting games because it's 1v1, but from personal experience, my best memories of any fighting games I've had is playing in a group with my friends and trying to stay on top of the lobby, or just knock the dude who's been kicking everyone's ass off of the top spot. Fighting games are great, and hopefully with the next generation of games coming out, we'll see a resurgence in the genre with new players picking up these games. I hope that the developers find ways to keep players invested that don't involve just winning more games, because if they do find that way, and find ways to hook players, I genuinely think that fighting games could break through the barrier of niche competitive games and burst into the mainstream in style. As always, a very special thanks to 64MHz, Almost Nap Time, Brudikai, Daniel Wiedericht, Games.png, Lady Dantalon, Melodically Me, Monact, Enhoa, Proxy, Ray W, Smeech, Super, Tom Tanks, and Zandatsu for being Tier 2 patron supporters. Learn how you can join this list in the link in the description.